Welcome to the Counterweight podcast. I am Doug Rogers, Chief Revenue Officer and Managing Partner for Waypoint Healthcare Solutions. And I'm joined weekly by my co-host, James Canary, founder and owner of the Upper Right Corner. Together, we are focused on speaking to and learning from growth leaders across the healthcare space about their journeys and lessons learned. James and I want to explore how growth leaders manage this tension not only for their teams, but also with their leaders and in many cases, board members and investors. We will discuss with our guests the career journey they have been on, key influences that help them put them into the position they are today. We will talk about successes and challenges, what they learned from these events for themselves and for their teams. Join us each week for a new episode with our guest. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn under the name The Counterweight Podcast. Subscribe, like, follow, and give us feedback as we go along. Now on to the show. Welcome to The Counterweight. My name is Doug Rogers, and I am super excited to welcome Kelly Crockett to the pod today. You can't see this, we're recording inside, but I do have to just give a shout out. We were just talking before we hit record. The sun is shining. It feels glorious. And I'm questioning why we're even doing this inside, Kelly. I don't understand the logic. We should be walking and talking. That's really what we should be doing.
I could not agree more, but you know what? We've got a few good minutes of good stuff, and then we can take a walk.
That's right. That is a fantastic idea. Well, Kelly, thank you for joining. Why don't we start with you introducing yourself, talking about the organization that you're with and the role that you have with that particular company.
Absolutely, Doug. Thanks so much for having me, letting me be part of the podcast, and welcoming me and LaunchCode to the show. My name's Kellye Crockett. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Impact at LaunchCode. LaunchCode is a nonprofit that has been around for about a decade now, and our goal is to give bright, motivated, passionate individuals a pathway into careers in technology. We do that by offering free technical training to people who have the passion, drive, and aptitude to complete our programs. We then pair that up with placements for those individuals into apprenticeships where they work with company partners that we have been working with for a long time now, all over the country, to get their foot in the door for their first job in technology. And then we transform their lives and those companies with these great, passionate individuals who join their organizations.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And I know you've told me this before. I did not realize, or it keeps escaping my mind, that LaunchCode, and we're going to talk more about the organization, but LaunchCode has been around for a little over a decade. What a wonderful mission. Kelly, how did you come across this organization?
So I started investigating. I've worked at the intersection, Doug, of innovation, STEM education, workforce development for about 15 years now. And
wow.
Prior to coming to LaunchCode, I was the founding executive director of IdeaSpace KC, which is a K-12 STEAM learning center here in Kansas City. It's a regional asset that we have that provides STEM learning opportunities for kiddos in 4 workforce development areas, one of which is computer science. And so I was really educating myself and getting deep dive learning as we opened that center back in the early 2020s, and really trying to learn about what the landscape was for fascinating educational opportunities that were out there. A lot of non-traditional ones, really trying to think about people who were breaking the mold of how young people got into education. Well, one of the fascinating models that I came across was LaunchCode. They were looking at ways to give people who might not otherwise find themselves a way into tech careers that opportunity. And so then when I finished opening opening IdeaSpace, I thought, well, what's another neat, interesting problem I might go and help solve? And that's how I ended up finding myself there. Not everybody takes a straight path in life. I mean, if I'm honest, most of us don't, right?
We don't.
And
I want to pick on that for a moment, because one, we say that a lot of people use that as a throwaway phrase, but Kelly, I just want to admit, not only are you 100% correct, but many times we would probably like to believe, I know I would have liked to believe, that I was going to have a straight path in my career. That's not how it works out. And having more awareness as to how you navigate the left and right turns, the ups and the downs, I would have benefited from that in my career to be a little bit better prepared for those types of twists and turns, if you will.
Right, right. And I mean, let's be honest. Only about a quarter of the U.S. population has a college degree, right? Only about a quarter of the U.S. population has a college degree. All right. So let's just start from that premise, Doug. So that means that we're dealing with about 75% of the U.S. country that does not have a college degree, right? They may have some college, right? So they've earned all the debt and none of the promise that comes with college. And so, life takes those turns. You started on a degree, maybe life got in the way of that, and you weren't able to get the promise of what that 4-year degree gives to you. Or maybe you finished a 2-year degree, but couldn't go on and add the 4-year credential to that. So what LaunchCode's able to do is say, hey, you started down a path, or life got in the way of that path. You are still a bright, passionate, motivated individual who would like to go from making a minimum wage to making a thriving wage. Let us help you get there.
That's a fantastic mission.
We add those credentials onto an individual who then can go to an employer and say, hey, here's what I've been doing. We've been doing it long enough now that employers know us. Employers have been working with us, and they say, I know what it means to hire a launch coder. I know what they bring to our organization, and they love it. They love the passion. They love these. Most of our folks are mid-career changers too, Doug. So they come in, they've lived a life, right? They have responsibilities. They're there to do the work. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point too, is, mid-career changing professionals, they're not there to explore. They're there to get work done and be hard-charging contributors to projects.
It strikes me, and there's certainly a lot of people who talk about this, but the workforce today is certainly very different than what it was 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I would go so far as to say that STEM, so all the concepts that fall under STEM are probably even more important, regardless of the role that you're in. Technology has become so pervasive in form and function of how people do their jobs that having a comfort level, whether you intended to or not, in that environment probably goes a long way to setting yourself up for success. Kelly, you mentioned there, and certainly let's talk broadly about how people get involved in LaunchCode, but you use the term mid-career, and talk a little bit about what that means and the opportunity that someone who may be doing something completely different that LaunchCode can unlock for them as they're trying to figure out the next turn of their step in a career journey.
Absolutely, Doug. Well, I think a great example, given where we are, who you are, who your listening audience is, would be a digital health example. So, for example, we have a really good chunk of learners who come to us from medical professions. So we get nurses, we get med techs, EMTs, people who have done a lot of really important, and I am personally grateful for, work during the COVID years, who have said, okay, that was great and all, but I'm kind of done. And I need to find something where I don't have to sanitize myself when I come home from work, right?
Yeah.
I can appreciate that, but they have an incredible skill set. So they bring this medical knowledge with them. They come into our setting. They become software developers. They become data analysts. And then they say, okay, I am now ready to go into a technical role, maybe at a digital health company, maybe in some other technical capacity, where they can contribute having 2 full layers of skill sets. So they have been the individual who's looking at the medical chart, filling out the medical chart, maybe helping transfer those medical records between institutions. So they have a depth of knowledge, not just when creating the tool, but as an end user as well. And that's incredible. Mid-career professional, another experience that we often encounter is many of our learners are parents. And so you think about having those families who have children who are utilizing medical services for their entire family and accessing at all the different levels what it means to be the end user in a medical situation. And so as we think about the digital health experiences that those individuals bring, they are not early life individuals who can only speak to perhaps their own experiences. They can speak to the experiences of their children, themselves, and also many times being caregivers for aging parents too. And so they just bring a much richer lived experience to the work. So it's their professional and their lived experiences that make them really rich contributors to the work world.
Yeah, I think that just rings so true. And Kelly, I've spent time in a number of healthcare technology companies, and I've had the chance to work beside computer science majors, beside nurses that were had taken classes and had learned how to code, or were in a product manager role, or EMTs, or other roles that are living the experience, if you will, of healthcare, and then are helping to infuse that experience back into the product. And certainly what I saw is there is a difference in someone who has had a lived experience and how they then think about solving the technology problems to make a product do a thing.
Right.
Probably said another way, they've hit the wall many times, and they know if this product is going to do A, B, C, it's going to hit that wall that somebody else may not have had the lived experience to do so. You talked about for Launch Code, and I want to go and talk more broadly about how people get engaged with Launch Code, the type of people that you reach out to, et cetera. But one of the phrases that you used was mid-career. And I would just say, right, it can be scary to think about transitioning from something even if that may not have the best long-term potential, to something you don't know. So how does Launch Code help those individuals navigate, if you will, that what can be a pretty frightening transition, and then set them up for success?
I appreciate your word choice there, Doug. It is absolutely frightening to make a mid-career transition, right? Anyone who has taken a 90-degree turn like that knows that you have to be absolutely brave. When my children were young, I used to tell them it's okay to be scared. Being brave means you're scared and you do it anyway. And that's what I will say about Launch Coders is they are some of the bravest people I have ever met. They have overcome adversities that some of us can't even imagine. And they are brilliant. That is what I will say. There's been some stumbling block for a lot of them that has come along, and they just couldn't go through what we would think of as a traditional route, right? It didn't work out for them. And a lot of times, most of the time, it's no fault of their own, right? There was a circumstance that presented itself. So what we really look for is those three keywords: passion, drive, and aptitude. And so when we think about things like passion and drive, simply getting in the door, the bravery that it takes to say, I'm 30 or 40 something, and I'm going to make a pivot from, I was talking to one of our learners. She worked in insurance. She'd been a claims adjuster for years. And she's told me it was a fine job. It was fine, but I didn't love it. I didn't care about it. I went home every night and scrolled Instagram because my life wasn't fulfilling. And she said, I knew there had to be more. And I signed up for Launch Code. I did some of your trial tests and things. I thought, this is fascinating. She said, and I got into class and it was so hard. I used to cry. And my husband said to me, don't you cry. You're not a quitter. Stop crying and do your homework. She said, I would have quit if it wasn't for him. She said, and I didn't quit, and I finished it, and I have never been more proud of myself for doing anything. And she said, and now I work at Worldwide Technologies, and I love my job. I love the people I work with. I love the problems I solve. I use my brain all day for interesting things. I come home and I code because it's fascinating. I love my career. Not only is she making a thriving wage, but her brain is on fire. She loves what she does.
Yeah.
And we do that for people year after year after year. It's amazing.
And I imagine her employer is getting more than the benefit of simply her as an employee because of that. It is both, she's bringing the skills and the abilities to do the job that they need, but she's bringing an extra dose of excitement, of commitment. And I would imagine because she's made the intentional decision to invest in something new, quite a bit of grit and tenacity to see yourself through difficult times, which invariably we all find in a role in a job, right? It's not always hunky-dory. There's ups and there's downs. And I would guess, I'd love your perspective here, but these individuals have had their fair share probably of ups and downs. They have that grit and tenacity to be able to push through that. That's probably an added bonus for the employer,
Well,
if you will.
absolutely, Doug. And our research shows that on average, our employees stay about 2.5 times longer in their
Wow.
roles than other employees in the organizations. So it's not only that they come and they push through adversity, but they come and they stay in the roles
Yeah.
because they're satisfied in the work. They're satisfied with their employers, and the employers are satisfied with them too. So we make really great matches on both sides of the coin. And I think that's a really important place because, in matchmaking, when you think about sourcing and talent acquisition, I mean, that's the crystal ball, right? Trying to figure out how to get, especially at the entry level, the right people in the right seats on the bus, right? And so when we can find that we're making those successful matches for employers, that just really makes us feel so great about what we're both doing for the candidates and for the company partners that we work with.
So let's talk a little bit about Launch Code specifically. You did a great job of describing the why for Launch Code, but talk a little bit more about what exactly is Launch Code. And if I were someone so inclined to make a transition or to want to learn something new, what are the specific things that typically Launch Code is teaching, either the tracks or the roles, and how would someone get involved or get engaged with Launch Code to go through that type of program?
Sure, absolutely. So Launch Code, we mainly teach 3 areas right now. We've done a lot
Okay.
of different things over the years, but we've narrowed down into 3 areas that are key right now in workforce development. Software development is
Okay.
probably our largest and most robust program. We run several courses a year. Those courses can be accessed through our website, launchcode.org. That's launchcode.org. Super easy.
We'll
And
put it up on the screen and then we'll drop it in the comments when we publish. So it'd be very easy to find.
Thank you, Doug. And then the other thing I would say is from an employer standpoint, I actually work out of our Kansas City region. I am a local Kansas Citian myself, and I can go KC.
Go KC.
My initials are also KC, just in case anybody didn't pick up on that. So I'm like born to be here.
That's
Okay.
right.
So anybody who is in the Kansas City region, I am your person. Like I have a whole team that works for me, but I'm the direct contact for Kansas City. And we will get you hooked up employer wise to make sure that I can find out what your needs are, how you want to partner, both company partners and also community partners. We do a lot of outreach in the region to make sure that we're working in a collaborative manner to meet the right needs at the right time. Another one of our programs is data analytics. And while this is not our largest program, it is our fastest growing program.
Really? That
Yes,
makes
for
sense.
sure. And I
Yeah.
think that anybody who works in the data space is nodding their heads right now going, yep, I get why. I know what's going on. I just had a meeting last week with one of our hiring partners who's looking at expanding into 3 new divisions of the company because data doesn't live in one space, right? It crosses so many different intersecting points in a company. And so we're having to bring in several more different departments to figure out how do we best meet the need for getting the right employees in the data spaces into the organizations. And so, I mean, those roles could be anything from data analysis to business intelligence to data visualization. I mean, there's all kinds of different things in the data space. And so that is one of our fastest growing programs. And again, any of those courses that we offer, launchcode.org. My information is always on the website. Doug will have my information as well and can link you to that. And either side of that coin, whether you want to come into the program as a student or whether you want to connect with us as an employer, we can get you hooked up. Make sure that you're making great choices for bringing LaunchCode talent into your organization.
And for our listeners, so our audience is really a nice breakdown between, we have founders and CEOs that listen to this pod. We have a number of people that are in sales or growth related roles. And then we have a good segment of operational marketing folks. If you are sitting in one of those roles as an individual contributor and you're like, man, I would really like to be closer to the product side, whether that is I'm going to be coding or I'm going to be doing more work around analytics or reporting, et cetera. They go to launchcode.org and that's where they would go through an enrollment process. Is that right? To
Exactly
determine
right.
how they would participate in the classes. Is there a fee that you need to pay to participate in these classes?
All of our coursework is 100% free.
Oh my
And we will
goodness.
continue
Yeah.
to keep our courses free to the user. The premise there, and that's really the largest disruptor, that and our apprenticeship model with hiring. But the free learning modules keep it such that there is no obstacle to beginning the educational journey. You talk about having to be brave. I mean, time is our largest and most valuable asset. But make no mistake, money's right up there.
It is. Yes.
And, especially when you think about a mid-career individual who likely does already have some debt, whether it's for a car or a home or a previous education or all three, to think that you might then say, oh, I will just have the luxury of adding on another degree or credential to my debt ratio load. It's just not possible for so many people. So we've removed that barrier and said, you're smart enough, we'll take you. And so we do an assessment, and it's really more about mathematical aptitude and problem-solving ability. We do not ask for any specific coding knowledge prior. And so we do those assessments, and if you could pass those, then we let you through our admission process and say, come on in.
So for all of our listeners, the work environment certainly is ever dynamic and is changing as we speak between what people are looking for, what people need. If you are interested in making a change and you want to get closer to building a product, to coding, to doing the data analytics, et cetera, I would encourage you to take a look at launchcode.org. It is a great transition point that you could consider. Now, Kelly, the opposite end of that spectrum, or the other side of that coin, is then the employer side. So talk a bit. I know you've described what you do, but just give a little bit more color around what your role is with LaunchCode. And then more specifically, how do employers engage with LaunchCode to then harvest this talent? And what does that typically look like? Contract to hire, you use the word apprenticeship.
Sure.
Just talk a little bit more about what that dynamic is.
Well, and I want to be really clear. A lot of the conversations that we've had so far makes it sound like we're an education organization. And I really like to think of us as a workforce development organization. Yes, we provide free training, but we only offer enough courses and seats in those courses to meet demand. So I'm never going to suggest that we overeducate and put you out there in the world with a credential if we don't see any need for it in the workplace. If we don't see a demand in the job sector, in physical regions or in virtual jobs, remote positions, that you can get a job in.
Yeah.
Because credentialing that gets you no job doesn't even matter if it was free.
Yeah.
That's not going to change your life. And we're out there to get you a job in tech. So a credential that doesn't do that doesn't really help out. You've wasted a whole lot of time and been super, super brave and made no difference.
That's right.
So we are a workforce development organization. So we work very closely with company partners in St. Louis, Kansas City, and then with remote placements all over the country to say, what is it you need? That's how we develop our curriculums. That's how we update our curriculums every year. We just did a massive overhaul last year. So all of our curriculums are up to date with our company partners. And we say, okay, what are the skills you're looking for in these areas? Then when we come back to an employer, we'll say, okay, here's a group of grads for this role that you have available or these roles that you have available. And in some cases, they'll say, you know what, Kelly, 80% of this is spot on for what we need, but there's this 20% gap. And in that case, we create specialized career development pathways that extend beyond our regular curriculum to make specific modifications to meet that need for that particular employer, especially when you're dealing with, let's say, startups where they don't have the luxury of having a giant PD budget. I mean, they're startups, right? We can help meet those gaps for them as they're growing their workforce in those really high vertical areas, right? Where they need really, really quick timing. So we can work with all employers of varying sizes to make sure that they have what they need at the moment that they're ready to grow with their tech force.
That's fantastic. What are you seeing in the conversations you're having across the KC Metro?
As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a lot of data roles. We're seeing a lot of interesting application of data roles too. Again, where do those fit within the organization? How are we putting those together? The third thing I would say is people are really starting to dig into how and where they're using AI. They're doing it in less high-risk industries first, where they can do it in a way that is safe and comfortable. And then they're doing it in super, super high-risk areas like defense, where they have to do it. And then some of our industries where they're highly regulated, like finance, they're holding back on that. And they're going to be some of our latest adopters because they have to wait for regulatory compliance issues. And I think that's going to be where you'll see your latest adopters coming in as kind of the laggards there. But again, not because they're laggards in the industry, because they just have compliance issues. And so those have been some really interesting trends that I'll be watching and hopefully continue to see that uptick in hiring. Everybody wins when the region's able to hire.
I would be interested for our audience, especially those that either are founders or operation leads and digital health companies, as they are thinking about onboarding new talent, how would they engage with LaunchCode? Should they reach out to you, go to launchcode.org, and just frame for them, how would they actually hire talent out of LaunchCode into their organization?
When you're working with founders, you're working with a really unique skill set of individuals. They're oftentimes really they do every job in the organization, right? And so what I find is that sitting down with a founder, I come from a lot of entrepreneurial background myself, having launched Idea Space as a social entrepreneurship effort. And so what I really like to do is say to them, let's find out all the skills that you need on your team and how many people you're going to need. We can bring in one, we can bring in two. We've worked with startups in the region where we seeded the whole organization, Pay It here in town. Yeah. That was all launch coders that came in, that we were the starting force. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was just on the phone last week with 2 different startups who are looking to seed with launch coders again. So it's not uncommon for us to come in and seed an early stage company with a whole cadre of launch coders that can come in. They're super versatile, they can sit in the ambiguity and the soup of the ambiguity that is required to be in a startup environment. And what I do is I look for people in our candidate pool who not only have that strong skill set, but also are individuals who have that secondary skill set of being comfortable in that ambiguity that's required to be in a startup entrepreneurial environment too.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I would encourage for our audience, if you're thinking about building and then you're going through the journey of how do I find talent? What's the talent that I need? I think we all know, whether you've been in the seat of hiring or you've been on the other end, it's a hard process. And it's actually harder than you think to find talent that matches the skills for what you need in an organization. So number one, I'm just going to say it again. If you are a digital health founder and you are thinking about expanding your technical teams, reach out to Kellye Crockett, launchcode.org. They should be an asset that's at the top of your list for how you bring talent into your organization. And then I would add that, Kelly, and you've mentioned this several times as we go through, and I don't think you can emphasize this enough. The talent that LaunchCode is helping develop is more often than not talent that has had a wide and diverse experience through their life. And that experience, that collective experience, that diversity of thought is going to be additive to your organization in ways that's hard to quantify, but impactful in terms of your success. What's the best way for people to engage with you, Kelly? How do they find you if they want to have a conversation?
Well, probably the easiest thing is to just connect with me on LinkedIn. And then we can go from there. I'm just, find me on LinkedIn and then we can get connected there and we can take off from there. I'm very open to connecting with anyone there and then we can just start a conversation. I love a good cup of coffee or a Zoom meeting always is a great way to get a good relationship started.
So, and somewhat unrelated as we bring this to a close, the sun's out. We may or may not be done with winter. I'm no groundhog, so who knows? But anything top of mind, Kelly, that you're going to do, at least in this sunny interlude that we have? Go out for a walk, maybe fly a kite. I don't know. What's at the top of your list?
2 things. Number one, take my goofy dog out for a walk. She has been woefully underwalked the last 2 months. And number 2, our seeds arrived in the mail.
Ooh.
So we're going to start planting our seeds for our summer garden.
Ooh, anything in particular?
Tomatoes always.
Yeah.
And for the first time, green peas. My children have developed a liking for green peas, and they've never had them fresh in the garden. So I'm going to blow their minds this summer.
Well, as we get to summer, you'll have to share some pictures with the audience so that they can see the efforts coming from your green thumb, if you will. Kelly, this has been fantastic. I just would give a shout out to Launch Code. Kelly has been coming to the Digital Health KC events. She's been doing a great job of creating connectivity and conversation around this very topic of how do you both bring talent in, train them, educate them in new skills, and then allow them to find roles that are great fits in organizations within the metro, outside of the metro, et cetera. And Kelly, I just appreciate that you brought this conversation to us, both on the pod and then what we've done leading up to it. It's been really educational, no pun intended, to hear this story. So reach out to Kelly Crockett on LinkedIn, launchcode.org. We'll put the contact information in the show notes. Thank you for making the time, Kelly. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for listening. We are excited to bring new episodes out each week. We are incredibly grateful to our guests and our listeners. Let us know what you think by commenting on the episodes. We are proudly sponsored by the Upper Right Corner, which provides advice on strategic growth, including growth assessments and strategy, go-to-network planning, sales leadership and team coaching, and fractional leadership roles. For more, visit theupperrightcorner.com. Waypoint Healthcare Solutions is also proud to sponsor the Counterweight podcast. Waypoint HCS is a focused consulting organization helping health systems, providers, and organizations to develop and implement patient engagement strategies. Waypoint HCS provides strategic consulting and patient engagement technology guidance and selection. Waypoint also helps support implementation and ongoing program management. For more, visit Waypoint HCS's LinkedIn page or waypointhcs.com. Thank you to our guests and our listeners. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe, like, and follow, and we look forward to joining you again next Wednesday for another episode of The Counterweight.